The Professional Standards Committee of Sussex Police Authority, which monitors how Sussex Police deal with complaints about the police from the public, met once more on the 28th of April 2011. The meeting was, in a small way, an historic event, so I want to put on record a couple of challenges that mark departures from the normal uncritical support which is the established relationship of the police authority with Sussex Police. The meeting lasted an hour and 25 minutes. 3 items on the agenda, taking 55 minutes, were concerned with complaints about the police. Agenda item 8, 36 minutes. Agenda item 6, 19 minutes.
The minutes of the meeting, the inspection of the complaints register held on the same day, the 26th of January. Is that an accurate record of that inspection? Thank you.
That was agenda item 5 in its entirety. 16 seconds. I shall be returning to the minutes which took 16 seconds at the end of this video, as they contain a challenge to Sussex Police. The meeting was private, but the minutes were published on the website. Agenda item 6 can be represented by a short excerpt to illustrate how the committee are examining complaints by division, today's area being Brighton and Hove Division.
But certainly in monitoring this and looking at it very carefully, there's certainly no particular trends or concerns that I've got at the moment with regard to the way that we manage and progress complaints and satisfaction on the division. Just gives a breakdown of complaints comparing the last 3 years, 08, 09, 010. And as you can see, the numbers are relatively low, and the only area where we're seeing a slight increase is in relation to failures in duty.
There was one noteworthy contribution to comments which followed this address from the Deputy Chief Constable.
I think that the attitude of police force to complaints has changed significantly with the introduction of the Taylor reforms, which I think has moved us away from a kind of pernicious investigative approach to officers' actions and opened up the opportunity much more towards management and performance improvement as opposed to a quasi-legal process happening whenever anything went wrong. And I just wondered how in Brighton and Hove you've brought that culture shift that's available to you now of moving, I think, away from what was historically called a complaints and discipline department into what is now a professional standards department, around being able to address people's behaviours rather than just being seen as something as a punitive action to take.
Having myself had complaints about the dishonest and corrupt police constable Francis rejected outright a few years ago by Sussex Police, I was dismayed enough by the implications of York's less punitive approach to malpractice to print his words here so that anyone wishing to read, mark and inwardly digest them may do so.
I think that the attitude of police force to complaints has changed significantly with the introduction of the Taylor reforms, which I think has moved us away from a kind of pernicious investigative approach to officers' actions and opened up the opportunity much more towards management and performance improvement as opposed to a quasi-legal process happening whenever anything went wrong. And I just wondered how in Brighton and Hove you've brought that culture shift that's available to you now of moving, I think, away from what was historically called a complaints and discipline department into what is now a professional standards department, around being able to address people's behaviours rather than just being seen as something as a punitive action to take.
The principal item for the meeting was agenda item 8, in preparation for which committee members were given a 2.5-page report by the Chief Constable and Chief Executive, accompanied by a 3.5-page Appendix A and a further 7 appendices of statistics and graphs which were not put on the website.
Agenda item number 8, paper 8, and we have a very comprehensive set of statistics and analysis from PSD about complaints against the police.
There were 45 pages on which committee members were invited to comment. Members usually looked for anomalies in the statistics. We'll hear a couple of points starting with Appendix A.
Could we move on then to Appendix A, where there are a number on the force analysis to start with, and then later on each of the divisions. There are some italicised headlines, and if you want to pick up on any of those on page 1, anyone? So over the page to the rest of the force analysis and Brighton and Hove and parts of East Sussex, anything there? Peter?
I wondered, Mr. Chairman, what the rationale was for, this is the foot of page 2, for the statement that whilst East Sussex officers are the most likely to be subject to a complaint. Why is East Sussex officers more likely to be subject to a complaint, I wonder?
Bratton is referring to the sentence, whilst East Sussex officers are the most likely to be subject to a complaint, the actual number of officers involved reduced slightly in the last year. He did not mention the 45% increase in failures of duty or the 76% increase in Type S other neglect or failures in duty. Bratton's query elicited responses from the Deputy Chief Constable and from a detective inspector who is promoting the church. I leave you to evaluate their responses for yourself.
Whether there's a behavioural issue to it, I think that's merely an interpretation of the statistics that's in place there. Whether we can dig more below the surface as to the causes of those being the statistics that come forward, I couldn't answer at this time without more work to it. It surprises me to a degree on looking across the force with the level of protest that we've seen in Brighton over recent months in place there, and this is sometimes a tactic that's used around protest. But I think I would interpret that as being a statistical one, and could take it away to have a look at the behaviours, but I can't foresee us being able to decipher anything around the behaviours over and above that, Chair.
No, Emma, you can't shed any light on that.
No, it's literally because the 29% of officers have had a complaint, which is more than the other divisions, so it's just a sentence alluding to that figure.
Okay.
Then a query about something on a later page was to lead to an unexpectedly challenging comment.
Just to point out on the page 5, you see, and I was like, listen, back on the complainants, ethnic appearance and stuff. What the figure I am actually concerned about on this page, but maybe I'm getting something wrong, and Giles can help me if I'm being a bit of a data idiot here. But it seems to me that there's, from the work I've been doing with the stop search, that it's widespread that the BME population has grown quite significantly over the last 5 years in this county, and 10 years by a big degree. And yet, over that time, the percentage of BME complaints hasn't really grown at all. So that I would have expected that percentage to increase. So I'm wondering if there's an issue about confidence to report or complain from that part of the population.
So, numbers of black and minority ethnic individuals have increased, but the percentage of complaints from them has not. Is that because they lack the confidence to complain? The answer from Faz implies that the problem is with the police, not the complainants.
The impression that I'm getting is that, speaking to a number of people, certainly in Crawley, where we have a large proportion of the BME community, is that when they go to the station to make a complaint, that sometimes they're waiting around for somebody to take the complaint, and other times they're told, well, we don't want to take your complaint.
That Faz should speak up for members of the public in a way that is critical of the police is, in my experience of several years of authority webcasts, absolutely unprecedented. It is the Deputy Chief Constable who comments.
I think the instances that Faz raised cause me quite a bit of concern. If we've got people who are willing to turn around and say, no, we're not going to accept this complaint, because exactly as Emma says, and you have said, is we're obliged to take the complaint. I'd possibly say try a different channel and put it straight into headquarters. rather than ask somebody to embark on the same process that hasn't given them the right response in the first instance.
So the police response is not to examine whether Crawley police are at fault, and if so, do something about it, but to suggest that the complainant complained to headquarters. When I experienced difficulties in getting Sussex police to register my complaints, I drove to police headquarters in Lewes, arriving there, as far as I remember, at about 4:40 p.m. on a weekday afternoon. It proved a wasted journey. I was turned away at the gate by a guard who said that I could not go in, as it was after 4 p.m. I'll end with another unprecedented in my experience challenge by the authority to police practice, which came in the minutes, which were dispatched in 16 seconds. The committee inspected 2 files which the police claimed to be cases of complaints about incivility. The term discreditable conduct was discussed in relation to a random file placed before the committee. Who placed the random file before the committee? According to the minutes, present were only 5 members of the authority, and in attendance was an authority policy officer. Did the policy officer select and place the file, or was that done by an unacknowledged police officer? The committee challenged the assertion of the Professional Standards Department in its correspondence with the complainant, in which it stated that the officer concerned was not guilty of discreditable conduct. It was acknowledged that the letter to the complainant was incorrectly worded. Who did the acknowledging, if not an unacknowledged police officer? Resolved that the head of PSD will speak to the officer responsible for the letter and will update the committee. How did they know what the head of professional standards would do? Will the resolution hold, or will it, like other resolutions, quietly disappear?